I was asked to come and do a personal story, and I love talking about myself, so that's fine. And I was trying to think what the important thing is. But first off, I think the question people often really, really want to ask me is, why would anyone write a book about being incontinent, which is what I did. It's the first memoir published about incontinence. It was published by Bloomsbury in the UK, unfortunately during lockdown, so it wasn't put in any bookshops. And then bookshops, I've had several booksellers tell me it's the hardest book they've ever had to sell, because it's quite a hard thing to bring up with a random punter who walks in. Anyway, it's a memoir, but it's also researched, and it goes and looks into stigma and the causes of stigma and why we humorise continence and all those sorts of things. But when I wanted to answer any question, I always go to the best source. So I went to the source of all my incontinence problems. There he is. He's lovely. He's 14 and a half now. He caused a lot of damage. And I said to him, why do you think I wrote a book about incontinence and my broken fanny? And he said, because you're a freak. And, 14-year-olds. But, he's very cheeky. And at first I thought I would be clever, and I said, I'm not a freak, am I? Look at the statistics. The statistics from America 2 weeks ago said 60% of women have been incontinent. Everywhere I go, it's 1 in 3, it's 1 in 4, it's 1 in 2. It's everyone. We're all leaking everywhere. I'm not a freak. We'd be the biggest country in the world if you put all the incontinent people together, and yet no one gives a shit about us. He was bored because I go on about incontinence stats all the time. And then I remembered I am a freak, because I've just used the word incontinence loads of times with you and referred to my own incontinence straight away, and it doesn't bother me. I don't know why. I don't even like fart jokes. I don't even think it's funny. But for some reason, I discovered, perhaps because I became more furious than I was devastated, that I can talk about incontinence in quite a lot of detail. And that's why I wrote a book called PMSL, which is a British sort of online mum's net phrase for pissing myself laughing. It's the name of an emoji, and the subtitle is, or how I literally piss myself laughing. Oh, we've not been moving along. Look, you didn't see him. There he is. I've got a clicker. I didn't realise. I'm so sorry, because you are a freak. It's all right. There you go. There's my book, Piss Myself Laughing and Survived the Last Taboo to Tell the Tale. Okay, never mind. And we're at a sustainability conference, right? So I thought I'd talk to you about what my book says about pads and continence products, which may or may not be sustainable, and how I felt about them. Some of the feelings I had about them were very raw. They were about what happens when you become suddenly incontinent overnight. I was a very happy pregnant woman. Well, I wasn't being pregnant. It's awful, but I didn't really expect to walk out of hospital unable to control my bladder. And so in one sense, pads were a lifeline for me when I first had them. So I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to start with my first experience ever of buying incontinence pads in the UK, which occurred in Mothercare, which is I don't know if it's a global brand. It's now sadly deceased, but it was a shop full of buggies and things. It's the end of summer 2007, a large baby wear shop. I'm in Mothercare. I'm not here to buy booties or baby socks or a new pram. I lived the excitement and the thrill of all that. I'm here because I vaguely remember they have a section full of products to help clear up mummy-made mess, from squirting breast milk to post-birth baby bleeding, and including what I really need right now, the extensive day-to-day equipment to stop leaking so badly I ruin my trousers every time I push my buggy up the curb. I've been told I have a problem down there, and it's already making my brain a bit wonky. I have referral letters in my changing bag to speak to a counsellor from the birth trauma team and have a physio session booked in. I feel overwhelmingly disgusting. It's so distressing and stressful to risk peeing if I try to carry my baby in a sling or do any of the other things other mums seem to be doing. I've been making do with sanitary towels left gathering dust in my bathroom when I was pregnant, but I'm learning they can't really handle pee, which doesn't drip like menstrual blood, but pours thick and fast if the floodgates open, and that if they get drenched, they're likely to chafe or disintegrate. I wheel my son through past the kids' clothes, the plimsolls and sun hats, the breastfeeding tops, the fancy dress outfits, kidding myself I can handle it until I see the potties and baby wipes. They signal we're in the zone, the Mothercare Isle of Shame. It's a shrine to absorbency. The shelves are piled high with plastic packaging in soothing blues and greens with teardrops to represent urine flow, and big, bold letters shouting loud about masking odour and discretion. There are cartoons of fake knickers, pads for your bed, and massive maternity towels all hiding next to the nappies. I'm new to this. I didn't realise there were so many nappies. Nappies in every conceivable size and shape for boys and girls, for swimming and sleeping, for potties and pulling up, and for useless broken muffs like mine. I think nappies everywhere, even ones for me, and then I burst into tears. It's dawning on me that this embarrassing, unholy mess is not a short-term issue. It's going to require these pads, probably a new mattress, and a way of preventing myself from ever crying again as I realise, standing there, that anything more than the most graceful sob will also make pee escape. I stand stock still and hope my jeans will soak up enough to save my dignity, and I pray, even though I believe in nothing now, that I'll be able to get out of the shop without bumping into anyone I know, that I can escape without leaving an actual puddle on the floor. So that's the first time I bought some pads. In the end, I rang my mum and got her to do it for me because it was just too much. But I don't think I'm alone in being someone who suddenly found themselves not knowing what to do. I know that's definitely an experience of men. When I was going through my book looking for more, because I think it's just so important to think about how patients actually feel when these things happen to them, I found, oh, it's gone now. I found this. Urge incontinence brings home the silence more strongly than anything else, perhaps because psychological and physical symptoms and sensations are so entwined. Your panic and anxiety does set the weeing off, but you have to move beyond seeing the whole shebang as a personal failure. Also, the treatment involves not running or giving in to fear, and consequently can be messy, a very messy business at first. It would have felt easier, better even, if I'd met someone else who'd been through it, if I'd met someone who could say, the treatment's hardcore, but it worked for me, if I'd had someone to swap thoughts with on laying out multiple outfits at the start of each day or getting adult piss out of a carpet. The retraining is in practice a brilliant mixture of humiliation and hope. I soldier on and improve. The Kegels tone my floor. I learn to live in the no woman's land of just continent enough with only occasional accidents. I also learn a lot about urinary tract infections, which antibiotics give you thrush, and what time of day the GPs need a sample by if I feel the burn. I try to be grown up, but there's a gnawing sense of something, probably disgust or despair, that in trying to fix my continence, I've wound up in a land of leaked-on pants and clothes. I am permanently on the edge of being unhygienic. My son spurs me on. It hatches new emotions in me as he rolls and laughs and sits and stands, dribbling the forward, upward motion of his life gleefully into my mouth. And with a pang at every milestone, his in life, mine in physio, my heart whispers temptations of a normal future where I can make plans and move on, have another baby even. See, I do like him really, even if he caused all the damage. He is the source of all the love in my life. But I think that it's really easy to say to people, incontinence should be just like a broken leg. And it's not, you shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's just a broken body. And you shouldn't be ashamed. That's true. It isn't shameful, except for you do feel ashamed. And sometimes in our rush to normalise conversations and to destigmatise things, we can make people feel like that they're wrong when they're not wrong. Society does shame us and make us feel disgusting. Nobody does like incontinent people. That's the way it is when you're incontinent. I think another thing people don't talk about is the frankness of what actually happens when you wet yourself. I think I've spoken to many doctors and things who haven't really thought about what they're asking you to do. If they're saying, do bladder retraining, carry on your normal life, don't run to the toilet. And I wish some of them would read this bit, which is just coming up. This is from my first night out after having a baby. It's based in a restaurant. It's a chain called Pizza Express. I'm getting drunk with my friends at this point for the first time since I've had a baby. And I want to be really honest, but I don't really tell them exactly the truth about childhood, although I make childbirth, but I make them laugh. I don't mention my incontinence issues either, partly because I'm hoping I can cure it before anyone finds out. I've been doing my exercises religiously whenever I remember I'm alive, which is ironic, because when the Prosecco comes home to roost and I wet myself in the restaurant, I learn incontinence really does make you feel kind of dead inside. I learned that at the same moment I find out what happens when one tenner lady is not enough. Pop quiz, what do you think happens? A short, warm burst of liquid? A drip? A squelching sound? Nope. Better. It's a combination of all three. And then the pad does a kind of roll in my pants. It's a kayaker in peril, twisting like those fortune-telling fish from the Christmas crackers. It turns over like a stinky quaver, like it's alive. I pray the other dinner guests will just imagine my early motherhood face has given me a new, slightly startled resting face, and I hobble to the loo, hoping the pad dumpling will not slide down my leg and end up like a filthy marshmallow on the floor. It's really hard, you know. I mean, I'm as practiced as any young woman in my organisation. Well, I used to be young, obviously, in hiding tampons in my cardigan pockets and making sure people couldn't see at school and keeping everything hidden. I think women are really, really, really good at that. That's why sometimes it's hard for men when they become incontinent very quickly later in life. Women have more practice at discretion because we're expected to be more discreet. But it doesn't make it easy walking around with a wet mattress between your legs. And so finally, incontinence knickers, which are the reason I wrote this book, because I absolutely lost my shit when I saw an advert that had someone looking really happy wearing a pair. And whilst they did save my life having pads and having knickers, and I could go out and carry on my life to a degree, I think the notion that buying one is always an empowering and happy experience, and wearing one is just a lie if anyone's ever put one on. They are much more comfortable than not being able to move around when you're incontinent. I get all that. But I just think we should remember... Oh, no, I've just realised what's happened. I've pressed the wrong button. How heartbreaking it is to wear them. And the truth that incontinence requires pragmatism, even when you think it will kill you. And I think pragmatism is something that we forget. Incontinence patients, we talk about resilience, we talk about pragmatism, and we talk about patient effort. But I don't think we really think about how many... I loved that stat this morning about how many hours work a patient does compared to the hours of input they get from anyone else. It's really hard work thinking about whether you're going to piss yourself all the time or poo yourself. They're really difficult things, especially when no one else can even use those baby words, let alone grown-up words for it. When grown adults can't spell fecal, it's very hard. Anyway, this isn't a pity party, although the last thing I would say, and I think is important for things like this, and this is a bit, I mean, the book's more funny than I'm giving it credit for, I think, in this talk. It is. Thank you. But I think it's worth knowing that incontinent patients, I think we do know that sustainability things make us a problem. That's my experience of people like me who have to use a lot of products, who have to get things on prescription and things like that. We do know. It's just that there's not much to do about it, is it? Because it's not us making all the decisions necessarily. So this is after I'd spent a few years researching what was going on with me and what was going on with other people. Even if the book also looks at depression, not just postnatal depression, but depression as in the most common secondary symptom to incontinence, which everyone ignores and no one asks questions about. Why don't you screen women and men with incontinence for depression immediately? Because it's a really big issue, especially with fecal incontinence. It's massive. I've not met anyone with that who hasn't had suicidal thoughts that they've confessed to me when they've read my book and talked about. I think it's really, really common. Anyway, even if I don't let depression talk, objectively, I am a drain on resources. All incontinent people are. All the drugs I've taken, all the space my condition takes up in my brain, hindering productive thoughts, not to mention the environmental waste, pads and fake knickers and clothes thrown away, all the extra washing. It's easy to absorb guilt. I'm very prone to this. It riles me that despite our excellent healthcare from the NHS, I foot a considerable bill to keep my life in motion, and the cost to the individual patient is a real issue. But as well as being another disadvantage for people with disabilities and chronic conditions, perhaps this also contributes to the lack of impetus or a broader conversation about what we can do to improve continence care across the board. There is a bigger story at play too. Patients may be coughing up a lot, but countries could save squillions if they had a more concerted and forward-thinking attitude to preventing and curing continence problems at all. Countless studies explore the economic impact of incontinence, which makes me wonder why. Why aren't policymakers and politicians more vocal and exercised about stopping people leaking, if only on the grounds of saving money? Activists in the UK now argue it would be cheaper to invest money up front for all patients, assessing women post-birth, and then when they have their menopausal, encouraging prostate health and pelvic floor exercises in everyone. That doing this as routine would help break down the wall of silence and nip problems in the bud before they're entrenched. But it still falls at the same hurdle. When nobody finds a way to start a serious conversation with everyone about incontinence, then the cycle continues. A lot of the book is about making mountains of tenor ladies from molehills of shame, which is, I think, what we've all been doing as a culture, even if we heap the blame in all the wrong places. Now, I've sounded very serious, and I didn't really intend to, but I can tell you millions of stories. I can help you walk in my shoes. I can help you understand things. There's so much more I could say, but I'm just one woman with arthritis and swollen ankles and like loads of shit to deal with about chronic pain and chronic illness to talk about now as well. So we do have to work together, and we all have to be a bit proactive, because I keep hearing the same story again and again, and I can't tell you how depressing it is to hear the same thing and the same concerns. We've all got the same problems. We can solve them, I think. I can tell you about things like the grimmest realities or crinkly knickers or the million judge decisions I make every day, or that without good products I wouldn't have had a job or be alive. But probably, I'm just very tired, like I think a lot of incontinent patients are. This is what some incontinence patients said to me, though, when they read my book or articles I've written or other articles about incontinence. There is a lot of hope, because what you haven't mobilised today, but what you have is millions of people who want to talk about their experience if you give them the right validation and opportunity. And that involves frankness. That doesn't involve saying, have you got a problem down there? That involves saying, it's really awful when you're wet yourself, but we can do something about it. It's a slightly different approach. I can't tell you the emails I get. They're so moving, but it's been quite a burden. I have to say, it's been very depressing, but it has also had things like this, which I thought was really telling, from like a really brilliant, she's like really, really successful media person. The idea that just hearing or reading any kind of honest story, not a booklet, not a leaflet, not a poster, not a picture of your sexual organs that looks like a ram and doesn't feel like a squishy white belly pushed into a pair of continence knickers. Something that feels real is really important. I think I'm not very good at summing up, as you can probably tell. I am in the book, don't worry, it doesn't leave it a loose end, but incontinence is emotional as well as physical if you're going to talk about patients' journeys. And I think that we can forget that because it's too hard, because it's upsetting and depressing to know that if you're fecally incontinent, there are studies that show other people would rather be dead than be you. That is quite depressing, but it is in its own way validating. At least you know the shame's real. It's an emotional journey as well as a physical journey. And everyone behind your curtain or buying your products or looking for help or looking for surgery is very different. They've come to you from a different emotional journey, but that doesn't mean you can't connect with them. We know, and this is going to sound like I'm haranguing, I promise I'm not, but it has a lot to do with sustainability and pads and innovation and changing the landscape and new policy, because if you understand how an incontinent patient feels, if you know why they don't get help in the first place, or why they've suddenly become reluctant to get any more help, or why they're not eating the right banana because it's so fucking boring to keep, like, I was looking at that thinking about all the advice I've had and how I probably look like I don't want to help myself. But sometimes it's like, which of the 150 bits of advice would you like me to follow first in your panopticon of advice from loads of healthcare professionals who haven't spoken to each other and are telling me to do different things, and I'm compliant, so I'm so tired. But I digress. If you remember that this key thing, that the trouble and the shame and the stigma is on both sides of the speculum and the stethoscope. I don't care what people say. There are definitely nurses and doctors who've treated me who thought I was disgusting. There are definitely those I know because they come and speak to me and they say, I've never told anyone. I'm also incontinent and I have these issues. And I think, we're all in it together. Think about the stats. This room is probably full of people who actually have quite a lot of rich experience that if they thought about it in the right way could really help. And if we remember that just because you shouldn't be ashamed of something doesn't mean people don't feel ashamed. They have every right to feel ashamed. We live in a global culture where in almost every culture there is a way of making incontinent people disgusting, sometimes in very real terms where they can't live in their villages or their homes sometimes because they don't make knickers that look like nice knickers. They just look like things my 90-year-old grandmother wouldn't have worn. And then they tell me on the telly that they're sexy and I should feel happy wearing them. But I think stories will make this work we're all doing sustainable. I think that's how we reach out. I think that's how we make things work. And I'm not talking about everyone doesn't have to stand up here. It's totally fine if your new normal means wearing a long cardigan and a tenor lady and feeling fine about it because your physio didn't work and you don't want surgery, but what you want to do is get as good as you can at your life and live it fine. Everyone doesn't have to write a book about their fanny, although more books on the shelf would be less lonely, I have to say. But I think you have to think about the story so you're talking to the right people in the right way and engaging them. Because shame is not sustainable and silence is not sustainable. And pretending that the conversation we have now is as honest and patient-informed as it could be when it isn't yet is not sustainable either. Thank you.